just go ahead and say this. These people, no matter how they got there, whether they were martyred after the tribulation, martyred before, somehow they're in heaven, and somehow they are rewarded with their ability to stand against the beast, to stand against the mark, to stand against all these things. This is probably a pretty cool group of people to be counted in part, as part of. And what are they doing? Man, did you see the way I stood up? Did you see how did you look at me? That is not on their radar. The only thing they can say is, look at God. How awesome is our God? How awesome you're the Lamb. You're everything. Great and marvelous are your works. O Lord, the Almighty, righteous and true are your ways, King of the nations. Who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? For you alone are holy, for all the nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. Not only is that their testimony then, but I think what got them to this place of prominence is that was their testimony all along. When they came under tribulation, when they came under temptation, they said, you know what, as tempting as that is, no thank you, because I'm going to turn my eyes on the one who is the great and marvelous one. I'm going to turn my attention to the King of the nations. I'm going to only do what the one who all will fear would have me to do. Exodus 15 is where the song of Moses comes from. It's the song that Moses sings whenever the children of Israel are delivered from the Egyptians. And how much greater is it going to be when all of mankind is delivered from the bondage of Satan and the sin that he has and he throws at us. Verses 5 and 6 says, after these things I looked, and the temple of the tabernacle of testimony in heaven was open. And the 7 angels who had the 7 plagues came out of the temple, clothed in linen, clean and bright, and girded around their chest with golden sashes. They're clean and shining, I believe, because number one, they're angels, but number two, they just walked out of the throne room of God. And so, I mean, the afterglow is just incredible. And verse 7 says, then one of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels 7 bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. Now, that's why I say I'm not sure that the angels already have the plagues, or if they have the plagues and then they get the bowls of wrath, and it's like J.B. Weld, where you take the putty of this and the putty of this and you mix it together and it becomes something that'll hold anything together. And this is here's the plague and here's the wrath, and once you mix it together, nothing can hold it. So we have to keep it separate until it's time to use it. I don't know that it really matters. It's going to be devastating to the earth and to all those who are still on the earth. And which of the 4 living creatures is this? Here's what I know. If it was important enough for us to know, we would know. But is it the lion? Is it the ox? Is it the eagle? Is it the man? I don't know. If somebody knows, you can tell me later, and we will both go, wow. God's wrath for the believer was ready to be poured out on all. And then this is how chapter 8 ends. And of course, in the Bible, there weren't chapter breaks and all this other stuff, but this makes a convenient place for us to stop today, because we stopped just short of beginning the bowls of wrath. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were finished. I believe that when Jesus pours this out, he's not out there standing going, I want to see this for myself. I think he is so compassionate towards even those who refuse him, that he prefers to withdraw into the presence of the King, of the Holy of Holies, and just not have to. I mean, obviously he's God, he sees everything. But what we see here is he's almost pulled himself back, because this is a time when he doesn't want to be on display. He doesn't want to be seen. He doesn't. When Jesus, we sang about it today, when Jesus came to Lazarus' tomb and he wept, Was he weeping because Lazarus was dead? Well, probably. Was he weeping because Mary and Martha were sad? Well, probably. Was he weeping because all these people were going, we knew you really weren't who you said you were? He was weeping for all those reasons. Do we think that he's not probably in this place, in this time? Is he not weeping here because he knows some of my precious creation is not going to survive this next round? And only those who've called on me to this point are going to be redeemed. It's when the final tally is done. It's not the will of God that any should perish. All of Revelation, all of this stuff was designed for Satan and those angels that fell away. It was never intended for man, but it became man's inheritance in the garden. But God loved us so much that he sent his son so that we wouldn't have to have this inheritance, but we would get a new inheritance, an inheritance of life abundant, that we would get a new inheritance where we would be with him forever and never separated from him. I want to end today with John 3:16 and 17 and a big question. I don't know why I had this image earlier, but God doesn't take any pleasure in the death of the wicked. Those are scriptural. Sometimes we get the picture of we're painted the picture of Jesus coming out like Hulk Hogan and tearing his shirt and saying, "Bring it on!" Whatever Hulk used to say. I don't know. That's not what he says at all. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but will have everlasting life." John 3:17 says, "God did not send his Son into the world to judge the world, but that the world might be saved through him." So many people in our society today want to make God be the evil one. He's the one who's trying to just mess things up. No, we live in a messed up world, and he wants to pull us out of the mess. He wants to clean us. He wants to put us on the right path. He wants to bless us with the good things. He wants to wean out of our life habits that keep us from being everything we can be in him. He wants to bring new things into our life, new habits that make us more connected to him. Jesus took time every day to be with the Father. Jesus said, I don't do anything the Father doesn't say. If the Father doesn't tell me, I don't do it. If the Father says do it, I do it. If the Father says don't do it, I don't do it. I don't say, well, now, Father, have you really looked at it from my perspective? Yeah, but I don't. That's not important. So I want to ask this morning, the only way that we can avoid what we are about to experience in the last half of Revelation, the only way that we can avoid the full wrath of God is that we know that Jesus Christ is our Redeemer, that he is the old-fashioned word, propitiation. We were guilty, and the judge says you're guilty and you're sentenced to death. And then someone who the court recognizes that has enough authority and clout can step up and say, no, I will take his punishment. Jesus is the only one who had enough clout and enough authority that he could step up and say, I will take his spot. So once Jesus takes my spot is taken. I don't have anything left to do to make my spot more taken. Because when Jesus takes it, he takes it all. Have you made that commitment in your life? Have you said, Jesus, I know that I'm a sinner. Jesus, I know that there is only one way for my sin to be redeemed, made right, for me to have a renewed and redeemed relationship with the Father, and that's through you. And so I confess you with my life, a life-changing belief. I'm going to begin to live for you. If you've not done that, there's no better way to start the year off than me just to make it plain and simple. I don't want you to experience any part of Revelation from the wrong side. I don't know if we're going to experience any revelation from either side, but I definitely don't want you to do it from the wrong side. If I'm here for the whole Revelation thing, I'll tell you right, it's going to be a drag. I'm not looking forward to it. But I know that when I get to heaven, I'm going to be able to say, God, you never left me. You never forsake me. You were with me the whole time. I'm just going to end with a little personal note this morning. And then we're going to just have a rare invitation. When I say rare, if you come here much, you know that we don't usually do invitations. We don't do anything normal. But growing up in my little town of Pompano Beach, in my little church, North Pompano Baptist Church, there were 4 families. Between the 4 families, there were 10 children, all of them boys. The Peasauls, we had 3 boys. The Elams had 3 boys. The Stevens had 2 boys, and the Bates had 2 boys. And of those 10 kids, there were 1 from each of the family were within a year of each other, and that was me and Danny Bates, and Keith Elam, and Andy Stevens. And we were all within a year of each other. Now, of all those families, the family that I was probably closest to and spent the most time with were the Stevens. Mr. Stevens was a plumber. Mr. Stevens had the worst voice of anybody I've ever heard, and he loved to sing loud. I think he did that on purpose. But of all the other fathers that I had, Mr. Stevens was the one who was most, because Mr. Stevens was like this: if you were there with his boys, you were his boy. If they all got a treat, you got a treat. If they all got a spanking, you got a spanking. If they all had to work, you had to work. If they all got to play, you got to play. That was just it. When you were at his house, you felt as if you were one of his children. And Mr. Stevens passed away back in September on his farm. And then this week, his son Andy died on the farm too of a heart attack. And listen, when we mourn, Jesus mourns with us. When we weep, Jesus weeps with us. I know that the enemy wants to come and say, God's not watching you. God doesn't care about you. God isn't paying attention to you. God's up there laughing right now because you're suffering. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Jesus wept. He wept for all of those reasons, and reasons we don't even know about. What gives me comfort is that the other of the 4 guys, Keith and I are the only ones that are left alive, because Danny Bates, Danny was killed when he was in his early 20s in college. He was working on his truck, and the truck fell on him. And Danny and Andy were probably the most similar in their personalities. And I just, this morning, God just gave me a glimpse of the 2 of them looking at each other, and just with these silly grins that they used to have, just these weird sense of humor. They're probably going, hey, look at Mike down there. Man, he looks old. What is the deal with Keith? He's so tall and he's so old. God is so faithful. And look, I know Sarah said it, David said it, the whole message last week was about it. I know that many of you are going through some hard things. Some of you have things you've been dealing with for years. Where is God? I don't know why he's delaying. I don't know. But I know that he is still on his throne, and he's still living inside of us. He loves us. He never, ever finds any pleasure at all in the pain of his children. He just doesn't. He just doesn't. So this morning, if you've never accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, I'm just going to ask if you'd come forward this morning and let me pray with you. And if you have other prayer needs, if you've got a prayer need, you can just go over there under the cross. And I promise you, if you get over there, there'll be somebody over there with you to pray with you. So let's just stand together and Father God, I just thank you. Your grace is enough. But sometimes we have a hard time remembering your grace is enough because of the pressure of life, because of the conflict.